Hi, I'm Rick.
And I'm Sharon.
And if you've been looking for YouTube videos with information about the builds and the actual construction of these cargo conversions, then you've come to the right place. Oh, by the way, what's with all the water?
Oh, well, today is a theme show. So we're really not talking too much about cargo campers. We're talking about your canoe most of the time. So canoes, water. I put water in there. It's a theme show.
They do work better in water.
They do, yeah.
So the name of our YouTube channel is, what is the name of our YouTube channel today, honey?
Okay. You're right. We are on the third name, okay? We just changed it again. But I'm sorry, I can't remember these names. They're so long. One I can definitely remember. I know we'll not have a problem with that. You go with that?
We'll be changing the name again. Probably next week.
No, I don't want to. You can only change it like once a month. So I think officially I'll be changing it next month. And I swear I think that's it. Okay. So Rick is going to share later on about his canoe, and I know everyone is excited about the canoe. A lot of people have seen pictures of his canoe with the outboard, and they've asked about it. So Rick's going to talk about that in a little bit. But before we get to that, I want to go over a couple things. So anyway, we do have merchandise. It is in the link below. Turn it over to Rick, who is going to give you a little bit more information about that canoe.
Well, I had to pull my registration card out for the canoe to try and remember how long I've had this thing. The canoe's a 1998, and I originally bought it with the intention of using it for scouting trips. And our Boy Scout troop started doing trips down the Delaware water gap. We would canoe 26 miles over the course of the weekend and camp overnight somewhere along. And their experience in canoes was also pretty varied. So what would end up happening is we'd usually be strung out in a short amount of time. That we'd be spread out like a mile and a half on the river between the front boats and the back boats. And I would go back and throw a line to the kids in the back, and we'd try to tow them and get them to catch up with the rest of the group. Well, trying to paddle a canoe and tow a canoe is a lot of effort, particularly when the kids are trying to help paddle and they can't steer because they're going like this all over, and it's wears you down. So I came up with this idea to motorize the canoe and also make it relatively safe, because you got an outboard motor strapped on the side of a canoe. It makes it want to tend to lean a little bit and whatnot. So I came up with this idea to build a set of outriggers for it. And that's what you're going to see in the video. But the kids loved it, because then I could go back with the outboard and throw them a line and start towing them. And as I'd tow one down the river, the next kid that was at the back of the pack would try and get over and grab onto the canoe that I was towing. And then the next kid would grab onto that canoe. And pretty soon we'd look like a freight train going down the river. I'd be towing like 6 canoes behind me. And the kids just loved it, and quite frankly, so did I. But that's how this whole thing got started. And even though I'm no longer still involved with the Boy Scouts, we still use the canoe to do weekend camping trips down the Delaware water gap. And
you towed people last year.
Yeah, towed her son and his fiance last year on a trip down through the river.
Well, sometimes they get tired when you're paddling, 20 some miles or whatever it was?
Yeah, we did about 20 miles on that weekend with them. And
so we towed them a little bit.
Being novice paddlers, they tire a little more easily. So anyway, that's how it got started, and I'll go into detail in the video. You'll see what it's constructed of. It's all stuff that you could buy in a Home Depot or Lowe's. And you got to go through the electrical and plumbing departments to put it all together, which sounds kind of funny, but
he's like MacGyver. Is there any gum holding it together? Or?
No, but I can tell you a story about how we patched a leak in a canoe one weekend that with some chewing gum and duct tape and made it down the river.
That's funny. All right. Anything else, or should we let it roll?
Let it roll.
All right.
Here to do the canoe video, putting everything together. It's probably been 15 years or more since I built this contraption for the canoe. And the idea was to be able to have it very stable with an outboard motor on so that you didn't end up tipping over. And at the same time, I wanted something that I didn't have to permanently damage the canoe by drilling holes in it or putting hardware on the canoe. So this thing all just clamps together in pieces. And it can be clamped onto the canoe, taken off the canoe, then you can use the canoe like a regular canoe, and there's nothing that gets in your way as a result of having the outriggers built. So we've got a setup like this, and I also am going to put a mount for the motor on the back so that that's going to be the same way. It just clamps on and off.
So tell me what you have there.
All right, these are outriggers that are basically made from sewer pipe. The first set I built were much longer, and the pipe was bigger diameter, and they were so long and cumbersome that they ended up, when you weren't using the motor, they ended up being in your way. So this is just a hardware bracket, a mending plate that you would buy in a hardware store, and a couple of hose clamps on both ends. And then this is electrical conduit that I pinched the ends on and bent it with a conduit bender.
Wait, where's the ends? And then you put a hole in here, I take it?
I put a hole in it so that it lines up with the hole in these brackets. You just slide up there.
What are you putting in?
This is a little pin with holes in it, clevis pin.
Okay, so one on this side, one on this side, and you have to know which one's which.
Yes, they're built slightly different in size, so the one for the front is a little bit different in size from the one in the back.
This pipe is mounted on this wood.
Right, the conduit's mounted to the pieces of wood, and then there's bolts and screw-on knobs underneath. Now, this is just a thing that I made to help keep the water from the motor when it's running from splashing too much water into the canoe in the back. Slides back here, and we've got a knob underneath that tightens up.
And is that where the motor goes?
No, it sits behind where the motor's going to be.
So how long would you say it takes to put it together?
It depends on how good I feel on any given day, but normally if everything goes right and the bolts haven't gotten too rusted and I forgot to lube them, it takes about 15 minutes max to put it together. And again, it's made with two pieces of steel and then these threaded knobs that will lock it in place once it's where I need it to be.
Just moved the boat to the water. Now you got the motor. What do you got here?
I have a Honda 4-stroke 2 horsepower gasoline outboard. This is going to clamp onto the bracket. And this is the safety line. In the event that you didn't put it together right, or you under-designed the strength of it, when your motor falls off the canoe, you don't lose it to the bottom of whatever you're boating in. I don't think I want to take it out in 7-foot waves, but it's been out in 2.5-foot waves already.
Where?
We've run rapids with it. We've had it out in the bays when it's windy. We've had it on Round Valley Reservoir, to which you can attest to, when it was windy.
Yes, with the white caps.
So at this point, we're ready to get in and go.
Everything working good?
It's working good. Normally when I first started up, once I've started the engine and put torque on the bracket, I usually check the bolts again to make sure that they're tightened up. But we're ready to go.
And we also always bring paddles, right?
We always bring paddles in case we decide to shut the engine off and paddle through a spot that's shallow or tight. But with the outriggers, the boat, it's almost impossible to tip it. Even though they don't look that big, they provide enough flotation to keep it from leaning too hard. And when I solo with the boat, I can even take my hands off the motor and actually steer it just by leaning and dipping one outrigger tip in the water versus the other. And you can actually slalom with it if you wanted to, no hands, which is kind of fun. Little goofy, but fun. Canoe leaves very little wake at low speeds, which is nice. Doesn't disturb the wildlife too badly, or the other boaters. Engine is air cooled rather than water cooled, so the exhaust into the water, but it does get a little loud at higher speeds for being such a small motor.
And there's his motor. It doesn't hit the pontoons. The pontoons are right here. And we're good. And all the water. All right, so I'm going to stand up. You'll see. Standing up. So a lot of times, I just stick my feet up and lean back. A lot of times I'll be having the dog, holding the dog. So, like I said, it's very stable. What you doing?
I shut the gas off to the motor. So right now I'm just letting it burn the rest of the gas that's in the carburetor until the carburetor runs dry, and then it'll shut itself off.
Oh, by the way, if you get a motor, you need to register your boat, right?
Correct. Unfortunately, the original motor mount that I built for this motor got destroyed trying to launch it in some heavy winds up in Round Valley Reservoir. So I've since built this motor mount. The first one was a little too flimsy, so I went with a heavier piece of steel, which I thought would be enough to do the trick, but obviously I got to look at it a little more thoroughly and upgrade to a little bit heavier piece of steel.
That metal right there that's bowed?
Yeah, the metal where the motor's hanging over the side is bending, and I want it to be straighter.
And
not have
didn't
as
you
much
say
flex.
this picks up a lot of water on you?
Yeah, it does. I have a solution to that. I just haven't implemented it yet.
An umbrella?
No, but sort of like the things that they put on bird feeders so the squirrels can't climb the poles. It'll be some sort of look like an umbrella, but it'll go around the motor shaft to keep the water from going up the shaft and getting in.
I usually help take this stuff off, but I have a more important job now.
Out of 4-inch pipe. They're mounted on the canoe. The board sits on top of the boat, And this goes underneath of the aluminum gunnel, and then when you tighten this up, it locks it in place. And that's all that does.
So is that big sheet of metal like a washer, basically?
Basically, yeah, except it gives it a little more surface area and a little more grab.
So that is basically the gear. It's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
6 pieces plus the motor.
6 pieces plus the motor. There is a link in the bottom, in the description page, to the engine. I'll get a close-up of the engine. It is a Honda 4-stroke. And there it is. That's all the gear. Say hi, guys. Say hi, Dave. Where's Rick? There we go. On camera, at least.
Like this video, let's have a thumbs up, please. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Gotta ring that bell. You hit that bell, you get notifications when we have a new video put.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.